please don't go like, oh.
It's being recorded.
Well, we're out of here then. Forget me. Shut down.
Hello and welcome back to Queer Atlas, a podcast operating out of Philadelphia AIDS Thrift at Giovanni's Room with the aim of bringing attention to queer and trans art, activism, and areas with a focus on the city of Philadelphia. My name is Katharine, and my pronouns are she, her.
Hey, Katharine.
Hey, Khalib.
My name is Khalib, and my pronouns are they, them. In each episode, we'll have an interview for you with a special guest, book recommendations, and a taste of life here at the store. Community is more than the places you go, and we want to have fun bringing you to Giovanni's Room.
This episode, we're sitting down to talk with Nicole, who owns South Street Art Mart, an outlet for independent art and artists with a pre-internet retro style and a distinctly queer sensibility. Nicole graciously sat down to talk with us about the appeal of the specific in art and one's personal interests, queering mainstream media, and the rise of gritty as a patron saint of Philadelphia. Stay tuned for that in just a moment. So actually, we should begin by telling everyone that last year, Giovanni's Room actually held a writing contest, and we called for submissions of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And we actually read over all these submissions and put together our favorites into an anthology called Queer Book. And it was quite a smash. We really loved the process. We loved working with everyone. We were very proud of the final result, and we had a final winner. So we decided to do it again this year. You excited?
Well, I'm actually very excited because when I first began working here last July, the first writing contest had just finished, and we were releasing the Queer Book. And when it came out, that was kind of like midway through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And reading the stories in the book, the poems, the short writings, was just so amazing because there was a lot of really simple, really universal, and just stories about grilled cheese or vacations or partying, and it's just such a pure book. And the writings from everyone in the community, and seeing writings from people who go to my school was such a cute thing. So I'm really excited for the next one to come out.
Yeah, I think last year it was definitely sort of a needed exercise during the containment of the pandemic. And again, we had so much fun doing it, and we love the results so much. We want to do it again. So we're asking for submissions of no more than 2,000 words, nonfiction or fiction, no more than 5 poems. And actually this year, we're also having a new contest to design the cover art for this year's anthology. Last year, didn't we have this historical illustration of Giovanni's Room, and that was the cover art, right? Yeah. So that's going on right now, and we're taking submissions through July 1st. I think it ends at midnight Eastern Standard Time. There is a submission fee of $10, which will count as a donation to Philly AIDS Thrift and go toward benefiting local communities. Trying to think of what else I should add here. If you go onto our website, www.queerbooks.com, there is a page with all the rules and all the fine print. So you can check it out there. We just wanted to mention it.
So what have you been into recently? Books, shows?
Actually, I think I want to turn it on you first. Mine's a bit of a bummer.
Okay.
So why don't I ask you first what
All
you've been doing and watching and reading?
Well, besides the Queer Book, which I've been reading this week, I just finished up a show which was kind of recommended by you, but isn't really. Snowpiercer.
Aha!
You're telling me to watch the movie. So one day I'm like, all right, I'll sit down and watch the movie. I forgot again to bring
you my DVD to loan it to you. This is like 2 weeks. This is embarrassing.
Well, I was like, okay, I'll sit down and I'll watch the movie. So I go on HBO, and I find what I think to be the movie, and I watch through it, and I get to the ending of it, and it turns out to be a show because I see the credits roll, and then I see the second episode begin.
You got trapped
So
into
I'm
watching
like, all
the
right,
serial.
I'm trapped into watching this new series. But first season was really good, really cute, and really cool because it's a story about the world ending because of climate change, and then the world freezes over and there's no way anyone can survive on the planet, so they're just rotating the globe on a train. And on the train you see basically the systems of the pre-existing world live on within this train circling the earth. So there's the first class, second class, third class, and then the tail of the train, which is the people who are just like completely shut from anything.
The underclass.
Yep. So
it's kind of posing the questions of how easy is it to shuck these preconceived ideas of how we should stratify our society, that it endures even when in the middle of like an apocalyptic winter on a freaking train.
Exactly. And I think that's really cool because you can see the system work on such a microscopic level. But the show quickly tumbles after the first season to like a slice of life type show where it's less about like the politics of everything and more into the characters themselves, which is cute because there's some really cute characters and character dynamics. But I don't know. I ended up paying for the second season because I was so invested in the first, and there's a paywall for the second. And I was like, all right, like I don't have anything else to watch. Like I'll just watch the rest of this. But yeah, really, really mixed feelings about this show. I feel like I can be really critical when I watch something.
Yeah.
Just because I'm not someone who's really used to watching too much television. I recently started watching different shows because of the pandemic. So watching this has been interesting to see like how they managed to make this end of the world apocalyptic snow train into like a slice of life like TV show.
I don't mind being critical about things. I don't necessarily think of it as separate from enjoying them. Often actually I think I sometimes get more enjoyment out of a thing if I'm allowed to find someone I can discuss it with and tear it apart and just sort of dig in a little deeper with and process my own thoughts about it.
Right.
Sometimes I don't even understand what my feelings or reaction is until I process it out loud with another person.
Well, they're supposed to come back with the third season, and I've accepted this. I've accepted the show for what it is now, and now I'm invested into like the people and the relationships because, you know, it's a small train, so you have so many different interpersonal relationships with different people. There's this one cute gay couple. There's like this one person who's on like the second class of the train, and then there's the first class of the train, and you start to see relationships between the different classes and how they meld together. They're cute. The show is weird. So, but I love it. I love it for them, and I guess I'm here for the characters now more than the show itself. So
Yeah.
that's been what I've been watching.
Nice.
Yeah. So what's up?
Oh, okay. So I've actually been waiting for this book. I finally finished it this week. I've been waiting to get a hold of this book from the library for quite a long time. It actually came out last year. And get this, it's a historical fiction book set in 1918 during the Spanish flu.
Oh.
Yeah. Apparently the author actually started writing this book in 2018 because she was inspired by the centennial anniversary of the Spanish flu. And she says that literally after she approved final edits on the manuscript and sent it off to her editor, that was March 2020. And then it was published like 4 months later in the middle of our actual pandemic. And I remember reading the description and being like, oh man, that's a great book that I will read once this has calmed down. Yeah. It's a little too real to read in the middle of it. It's by Emma Donoghue, who is really particularly well known for her book, The Room. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
I think the Room won like all these prizes, the Orange Prize, I think the Booker Prize. It was made into a movie. She has a history of writing like queer adjacent fiction. I think her debut, or one of her first sort of breakout titles, was called Slammerkin, and that's also a historical fiction novel. It imagines the life of a real life young woman who became a prostitute at something like age 14 or 15, and she was hanged at age 16. Wow. And this is sort of setting up a bit of a pattern, I'm realizing, with Emma Donoghue, where she's an extremely good writer, and I will get into that, I promise. So speaking of being critical about things you enjoyed, but it seems like her shtick, her thing, her interest, her passion, her focus tends to be the terrible things that cis women in particular have been subjected to over the course of history, which is a tough pill to swallow sometimes. It's like, especially when we're talking about like escapist or entertaining fictional reading, like things that I'm reading on my off hours, as it were. This is great. It had a fascinating premise. Like I said, it sets during 1918. It actually takes place over the course of 3 whole days. And we're following this woman who is a nurse in Ireland and who is sort of in charge. She is in charge, effectively, of not the entire maternity ward in this hospital in Ireland, but she's in charge of the patients that are pregnant and have the flu.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So yeah. I think the name of her ward is maternity/fever. And it's, like I said, it just sort of follows 3 days in her life. And it also introduces the fictional portrayal of a real life character. This woman named Dr. Kathleen Lynn. She doesn't feature as much as I would have liked, I think, in the story, but she's very interesting, and it was great to learn that she was a real life persona. She was a doctor, and I think quite a high-ranking officer in the Sinn Féin army, which was a sort of they wanted independent rule for Ireland. I think they still do. I think, yeah, I shouldn't say it in the past tense. They are still around. They're a political party. But at this time, their main point was they wanted Ireland to not be under the thumb of England. They wanted home rule. And there had been an uprising 2 years before, which had garnered quite a lot of bad feeling among the local Irish populace because people had died, civilians had died during the uprising. And now 2 years later, they're also involved in World War I. So a lot of people in Ireland have been drafted or have been sent off to fight with the English in the English army. So there's all this political tension going on, all of the tension of living during a pandemic. And then, unfortunately for me, there is a lot of, how should I put this? This is not a book for anyone who has any kind of squeamishness around medical procedures, full stop. And I didn't consider myself someone who would fall under that category because I actually have medical people in my family, so it's kind of bred out of you when you grow up in that environment. But I tell you, man, childbirth is something else. There are quite a few scenes of really graphic and problematic, meaning, they run into real medical problems during the childbirth throughout this book. And I did not know what I was going into when I signed up to read this book. It is intense. Yeah. It's really intense. And it's also, like I said, talking about sort of the travails that women have been subjected to. I mean, I always knew that the medical history surrounding pregnancy and childbirth was dicey at best. So I can't say that I was surprised by anything depicted in the book, but it's never a nice thing to revisit.
Yeah, especially under the conditions that you're laying out. Yeah,
no, there are some really, it's one of those, it's so gruesome sometimes. You think, gosh, the flu is actually the least of these women's problems. It has more to do with, lack of doctors, lack of training, lack of basic understanding of biology in this sector. Despite all that, I know I front-loaded the book with sort of everything that really gave me pause. Emma Donoghue is such a skilled writer. I mean, she really is. I'm
sorry. You say the book takes course over 3 days?
3 days.
How does she lay that out?
You basically just sort of walk in. Like, there's no central conflict. She just sort of throws you in there where she's like, you're now inside the head of this nurse who is working in this ward, and you just kind of take it on a roll. And that's the kind of thing that I think proves how good Emma Donoghue really is, which is that in the hands of a lesser writer, this would be a lot of information just thrown at you, and you just sort of been drowning in like historical facts and minutia, and you'd be bored. And she manages to avoid that. She makes it all either character relevant or plot relevant, or there's something really tense happening right on the page in front of you, and you really want to know, even with everything going on, that like if you're like me, had you like skimming some of the descriptions, you really want to know how it turns out and how it resolves. And the issue is that here's this nurse, and she's trying to keep her patients alive, and there are the people we're introduced to who also work at the hospital. We get to meet her patients, and then of course Dr. Lynn is sort of in the background. There's this idea that she is a doctor that's a bit more sympathetic, but at the same time she's actually being sought out by the police because she is a part of Sinn Féin. So it's a very sort of tense situation that Donoghue really, really makes feel real. And really makes you feel like you are there. And, you know, with historical fiction, it's always a bit of an issue. We are often introduced to people who don't have the mindsets or don't have the cultural attitudes that we want and we approve of. And I always think it's a bit of a toss-up between making a character believable and making a character sympathetic in that situation. And I think she also did a really good job with that, where you sort of see Julia Power, the main character. You see her change and develop, even just over the course of 3 days. But of course, she's tying her development back to things that have already happened, things that she's already observed. But they're coming to a head in these very 3 quick days. And so, I walked away from the book feeling a little bit emotionally bruised, but I couldn't deny how powerful it was. And it's a surprisingly quick read. It's just under 300 pages, and it's actually got quite sizable font. So I think I think they kind of cheated a little bit to make it look a bit heftier than it is. It's quite a quick and it's quite a quick read in that sense. Yeah. Do you think, I mean, is that something you would ever read? I'm trying to think who I could recommend this to.
I was going to say, I'm a little squeamish myself.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I didn't even think of myself as squeamish, but I was grossed out.
Yeah.
I did not ask for some of this information. I have mental images in my head that will never go away.
I had a phase where I watched through all of House, and every time anything happened, I had to like cover my eyes, so yeah.
So that's a little difficult. And also, like I said, it's not necessarily a happy story, but I don't know, sometimes there are books you read and you don't know if you'll ever read them again. I'm a big rereader. But I'm glad I read it. Hello, and thank you for coming back and listening to Queer Atlas. We are sitting down with Nicole and Nicole of South Street Art Mart. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
No, it's been really great. We're really excited to sit down and talk to you. You have a lot of fans here at the store.
Oh,
that's so sweet.
Oh, shucks. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. And just really briefly for the people listening, can you tell us like the location of your store?
Yeah. So we are just off of South Street. We are on 4th and South at 530 South 4th Street. We are right between Crash Bang Boom and a barbershop called the Cut Bar.
And how long have you guys been there?
So we've been there for 2 years, just a little bit over 2 years. We had our soft opening in April of what is time? Who knows? April of 2019. Yeah. And then our big grand opening was the end of May of 2019. So it's been 2 years.
Wow. All right. And you guys were initially a pop-up store?
Yeah. So initially we were approached by members of the Head House District here in this area because they were doing kind of like, I want to say like a holiday initiative where they were like, hey, if we give you one of the empty storefronts, can you fill it with what you guys do for the like holiday season and kind of like have one like less empty building and kind of encourage people to come shop like for the holidays down on South Street. And so that was November of 2018. So we got the keys like right before Thanksgiving. And luckily we both vend a lot of events together. So we had kind of a little network of vendors that all make handmade items. And we just kind of reached out to all of our friends and we're like, hey, I know it's Christmas time and you really need this inventory, but can you give some to us and we will sell it for you? And they did. And so we opened up and kind of took it from there. Had a little holiday pop-up that lasted longer than the holidays.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been a success.
It was really cool because we just thought it was going to be like 2 months. We've been together for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And then each of us have been like selling our own artwork for like a few years before that. So we've vended punk rock flea markets and craft fairs and conventions and that whole thing for years now.
Yeah, I saw on your Instagram you used to go to DragCon and RetroCon.
Yeah. Like horror conventions, pride festivals, you name it. There was one. We're getting a little too old and tired for that now, but there was one point where we were doing that like every single weekend.
Yeah, like some days, some weekends it would be like 2 different events. So like Saturday and Sunday we'd be at 2 different places, just like every single weekend.
So we kind of just thought the pop-up shop was going to be that, like an extended like a 2-month, just that pop-up shop where it wouldn't just be our stuff, but stuff from other artists that we knew. And folks that were shopping with us were so sweet and so vocal about how much they liked the shop and they liked the idea. And so many people said it reminded them of the old South Street, which was like the highest compliment to us because we, would come down to South Street as kids and young adults. So it was like a really big deal for us to hear that.
And when I think of like, when people say old South Street, I think of like when it used to be every single store was full. Because there are a lot of empty storefronts now. Everything was full and every single store was different. Like you could go all day bopping up and down South Street and never hit a store that was like the one you were just at.
Yeah.
So it was just like an all day event. And we are both from New Jersey. We used to come here as kids. Like that was a big compliment because that's what I used to love. That's what she used to love, is just being able to spend the whole day on South Street shopping these weird shops and like nothing you could get anywhere else. So that was like such a huge deal to hear people say that to us.
Yeah. Once folks started asking us if we were going to stay past the new year, we were like, we don't think so. And then we just did. They kind of just didn't kick us out.
Yeah.
No one was renting out the space. So we just stayed and it rolled over each month. And so many people asked us if we were going to become a permanent thing that we were kind of like, I think we should become a permanent thing. So it was all very seat of the pants.
Yeah.
But it sounds exciting. Like it sounds like making that decision, going permanent because you're there permanently now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we started out right by 5th and South and now we're right off 4th. And our landlord for our building now is actually our like apartment landlord. So he came to us and he's like, hey, do you guys want to do this permanently? I have a storefront if you want to look at it. And so it just kind of like all of these blocks kind of like fit together perfectly at the right time. Yeah. And so and I'm not a spontaneous person like at all. So I was just like, we didn't plan for this. We don't have anything like prepared. Like we can't do this. And she, thank God, is like, we'd be dumb not to do this. Like, calm down. It'll be fine. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. It kind of just felt like all of the pieces of like, everything that we've done individually and then together and then as part of the like art community here in Philly, it felt like everything that we had all the pieces and they kind of just put themselves together almost. And then we looked at it and we were like, oh, this is what we should do. And then we did. I mean, we had a lot of help since we didn't plan on it being we weren't like, we're going to open a store. This was not in the plans at all.
Yeah.
So when our landlord presented us with the opportunity to get the storefront, we didn't have first, last, and security. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't have the money to get in there. So our friend Sarah was like, well, what do you want the password to the GoFundMe to be? And we're like, I don't think we should do this. And she kind of like made it happen. So then we got a lot of support from friends in the neighborhood and a lot of businesses in the neighborhood, which was incredible.
Yeah. And a lot of the events that we like vend, like we got donations from the people who run the Trenton Punk Rock Flea Market, from the people who run the Philly Punk Rock Flea Market. Like, it was just really encouraging to know that we like had formed these relationships, that people cared so much about kind of putting their funds towards our success. Like, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, just the way it comes together sounds like what I remember of like Philadelphia 20, 30 years ago, where it was a bit more neighborhoody, a bit more, checking in on people.
Yeah. I mean, the number of small businesses on this street in this neighborhood that helped us get in the door of this space is just, I mean, it speaks volumes as to the, just kind of like the culture of the street and that very independent, very DIY nature of a lot of the businesses down here. So it's awesome to be like, to feel like a real part of that now,
Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm pretty new to Philadelphia myself, and South Street's one of my favorite places. And I haven't seen like the old South Street. When I was reading about it, reading that it was more of these DIY, more small shops, and now it's kind of just like these more so cookie cutter type shops, like pizza shops and so on. Like, could you speak more on that small shop vibe?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So for me personally, so I also have another job. Like, I have a retail job that I work on South Street. I work in Condom Kingdom. And that's like a South Street staple. It's been there for 30 years. And I've been there for 14 years. So that's like was always my home away from home. And it's one of the few stores that's still there from that like old school South Street vibe. And to me, like, when I think of old school South Street, like, it was really accessible to people too. Like, now it's a little bit more difficult for people to kind of just have a shop on South Street despite all of the empty storefronts. And part of that is because there's a couple landlords that, own a lot of buildings on South Street. They're not from Philly. You're usually like pretty wealthy people from New York.
Not ours.
Not ours. Not ours.
Ours is local, but.
And they don't really have like a vested interest in the neighborhood, in the city. And the rent's incredibly high, like so high that I feel like it takes away the opportunity from small people, like small businesses, to plant roots there. Because like, you're already on the hamster wheel before you even get your footing. And then it's just a matter of trying to pay the rent. You're not able to like cultivate like your business plan or your customer base or get like repeat customers. You're just always on that wheel. And then you see things come and go, and really quickly, because that rent is so high. And I think a lot of that has to do with so many of the landlords not being Philly people. Like, if you don't live here, if you're not from here, like, they just don't have that connection. There's no like caring about this because it's not theirs. It's theirs on paper, but it doesn't feel like theirs. Whereas I feel like that old school mentality, like our landlord for the Art Mart is the person who owns Zipperhead on South Street. He is the landlord for Wooden Shoe. And that's that like old school, like very indie, very DIY, very punk vibe to him. And so he cares. And I feel like very lucky that we have him as our landlord, because there is this concern and care for the street and the culture of South Street and the culture of Philly.
Yeah, like, I don't know exactly when that switch happened or how it happened as far as it changing. I don't know who used to own the buildings and who does now. Well, we do know who does now, but who did before and how that's changed. But it definitely, like, so we are both 38 and 37, right? So when we would come down here as kids in the 90s, young adults, early 2000s, the street was filled with independent stores. Zipperhead being one of them. Repo Records was there. Tattooed Mom was there. Condom Kingdom was there. and a handful of others that are still around. But it definitely was like, if you take all of the coolest places on South Street now and just like multiply them, it felt like that, where now I feel like we kind of have a more condensed version of that with empty spots in between, if that makes sense.
Right, it does. I guess it gets into like the larger question of like who is the city for, and when people
Yes.
come to the city and they don't understand the community and whose space this is, that's when people get displaced, businesses. So
yeah,
absolutely.
So we really jumped into it. So just
sorry, I feel like we like
real quick step back. Would you like to introduce yourselves, give us your pronouns, tell us what you'd like to tell us about yourselves as individuals and artists?
Yeah, absolutely. That's so funny. I feel like we just like launch right into the whole thing.
No, it was great.
Well, my name is Nicole. Last name's Krasicki. I also go by Tape Off TV. That's like my personal Instagram and what I go by for my stencil art. Pronouns she, her. And was there another part to that question?
Anything you'd like to share about yourself as either individuals or artists?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm a stencil and spray paint artist primarily, and one half owner of the South Street Art Mart.
Yeah.
Nicole Wigand. Yes, we are both Nicole. So that's always the like, wait, what? Yeah, no, we're both Nicole. Yes, we are married. Yes, we're both Nicole. So my company business, pre-South Street Art Mart, is Night Owl Designs. So I do pop culture inspired jewelry and housewares like light switch covers. I make ornaments, stuff like that. And it's all like pop culture inspired stuff I like. And my pronouns are she, her.
Your shop, which I've been to a bunch of times, is really, really amazing. I love it there. Walking inside for the first time, it can be almost overwhelming. You have pins, stickers, keychains, figurines, t-shirts, bags, patches, needlework, mixtape, zines, candles, earrings, necklaces, art installations, postcards, and the list goes on and on. Despite the sheer amount of art and how much of it is from different artists, there's a distinct aesthetic sensibility that keeps everything cohesive. And I feel like it's more or less grounded in like the mid 80s to the mid 90s sensibility. For instance, you have a Take One or Leave One DVD case outside your store that's painted with a Blockbuster logo. And a lot of the pop culture focus is on cult classics from that period, like Empire Records, Hackers, or The Craft. And even the pop culture references that are outside of that period, it's like it's being appreciated in a way that still feels reminiscent of that era. For instance, there's a lot of Stephen King nostalgia, but it calls back to like VHS tapes and cable movie showings. Or if the art is more modern, like about Stranger Things, it's couched in the crafting / DIY aesthetic I think of as being very like 80s to 90s.
That's like the best compliment that we've ever received. Thank you for that.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm like, no, that's it. That's what it is. I mean, that's us, right? Like we love pop culture. So a lot of the items that we have in the store or that we gravitate towards just go that route because that's what we love. Like our bedroom closet, we have 2 closets in our bedroom and we pulled all of the clothes out of one of them and turned it into a VHS closet. Like it's like because we needed the space and now that is full and we need to figure out what to do now. And when we first met, we bonded over movies and music, and we grew up in the early to mid 80s, 90s, and TV is my best friend besides her. So it just kind of I think that if different people started an art mart, it might look a little different, but whenever people bring things in, we're like, oh, that pop culture stuff you got there. Yeah, we'll take that. You know what I mean?
It's really just what we gravitate towards.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's like us having our own, it's like the 12-year-old me is like, wow, you get to have this space where you get to look at all this cool stuff. And it's like, kind of just like what I wish my bedroom was. To like
yeah. I mean, I'm the same age. I'm 37. So for me, walking inside, it was like instant nostalgia. It was crazy. It was like, oh, I know exactly where I am. I'm 13. I've walked my local, like, thrift store, and, my friends are outside, and, just, it was nutty. But I also think that, like, there's a rise in that aesthetic. There's an appreciation for that aesthetic now. Do you have any sort of thoughts on why that's sort of coming back?
Oh, we do.
It's so interesting because we kind of been having this conversation on and off very recently. So I make pop culture based stuff. I love pop culture. I love things I love so much. I wish I had merch for these things when I was a kid. So like I make them now. And I remember when I first started doing that, and I would be like applying for craft shows or trying to get my stuff in shops, it was like, oh, that's not art. So no, pop culture stuff is not art. And I've gotten some really, really nasty responses about my stuff, and not even like a quality of work stuff in like pop culture's not art. And now I see a lot of the same shows and shops that like had a lot of words for me are like full to the brim with pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
And like there were shops that did take my stuff, but they would like never post them on their social media. They would kind of hide my stuff in the back because they knew there was like one little nerd like me that would probably buy them, but they wouldn't promote it. And so now it's like the opposite. And now we have this shop where people really respond to that aesthetic. And it just kind of like, I don't know, it feels a little validating too.
I was about to say, it's kind of like our whole existence is us validating our 13-year-old selves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like stuff that wasn't cool.
Yeah.
Like people think it's like 19-year-olds will come into the shop and be like, we had the cutest kid the other day. I don't know how old he was, but he was very young. Like
very young.
Late teens, maybe. And we were playing Hole, and he's like, oh my God, I love Hole. This album's amazing. And he asked us if we had any Alanis stuff. And it was so not pretentious and not like, oh, you're just being like a young hipster kind of deal. Like he was just stoked, and it was like, man, the stuff that we thought was so fun and so cool and that we still do, that I feel like a lot of people could be like, can you guys like let it go? You're grown women.
Yeah.
It's very validating.
Never.
And it's fun. It's fun to talk about the stuff that you like with people that like it too,
And we're like people who don't believe in guilty pleasures. We're like what you like and like it like hard.
Yeah.
So I love when people get excited and they're just like unapologetically excited about shit. Like I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to segue here because it's interesting that, people from our generation sort of went through that where we were like, no, these really cheesy movies are important, and they say things like that.
Yeah.
Probably that for a while. Meanwhile, I'm sitting next to Lieb, who was before we were setting up the Zoom meeting, we were listening to Lieb's remix of the Twin Peaks theme.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you submitted that, right?
Yep. So I was going to say like the 90s, like late 80s, like 90s, it just feels like everything was perfect. And there's just like an authenticity to the art that was being made. And you start seeing like the biggest pop culture idols, and you start seeing like the best stories. And then after that, within the 2000s, you start seeing like the retellings of these stories. And then you see like a rehashing or rebirth of these artists. And I feel like, at least speaking for myself, I gravitate towards that period because I can see that as like the birth of just this pop culture boom.
Yeah.
For sure. It's
Absolutely.
when you think about movies and music, like popular music and all that, in the grand scheme of the world, right, of like the timeline, it's all still kind of new, So like that idea of celebrity is still kind of new. And I don't mean new like the past decade. I mean new like the past like 50 years, but still, And I feel like things come back around. Like we were wearing bell bottoms in the 90s.
Yes.
And like our parents were like, but we wore bell bottoms in the 70s. And we see that happening now with kids that are 20 years younger than us. Only they're wearing the bell bottoms that we wore that were knockoff. You know what I mean?
He wears the bell bottom. I'm never going back with bell bottoms.
I'm the bell bottom.
Hey, I say if you can do it, do it.
It's actually, you're right. I mean, obviously part of it is the 20-year, 30-year pop culture cycle. Like that's definitely part of it. But I was thinking as I put together that little intro, because I was thinking so much about your shop and the things I saw in your shop, tell me what you think of this. I was actually wondering about this. I'm sort of putting together this mental thesis in my head where that time from like mid 80s to mid 90s was kind of the first era of pop culture where it was like something that we could directly interact with. I mean, the 70s was the rise of movies, and it was certainly the rise of like good TV, but 80s brought VCR, so we could tape the TV and we could rewatch it. It brought magazines, so the pop culture, but it was something that we could remix. It was almost like the era of queering pop culture, because you could somehow own it and then pick it apart and remake it into something else.
I never actually thought of, and I'm taped off TV. I never thought about it in that respect, though. You're absolutely right. We could like take ownership of it in a way that people before us couldn't. And also still before the internet, and well, more specifically before social media.
Baby internet. It was baby internet. The internet was weird. Yeah. You go online and find weird stuff. And then again, that's the sort of the appeal of the era of like, you didn't know what you'd encounter when you went on the internet. Now you pretty much know exactly what you'll encounter.
Yeah. For better or worse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something to that too, without like, now that we're here and like that like need for the nostalgia of like the 80s and 90s, there's something really stressful about the current social media of it all. There's a lot of pressure, especially when you're like running our social media like is primarily Nicole, and it is like a full-time job. Is like you have to like try and figure out the algorithm and keep your stuff being seen and like know how to like kind of navigate that. It's very difficult. It's always changing. It's also very difficult because there's so much garbage on the internet. Like there's so much good, but it's like almost like surrounded by this toxicity that's just like maddening, and it will like deteriorate your mental health if you don't like take a break every now and again. And I feel like there's something really, like for me, like really attractive about a time where like the modern technology was a VCR, like where it just feels like there's not a bunch of trolls, and like it just feels like that pressure of like the internet as we know it right now.
Yeah, it was probably like harder to, when you sent out your stuff onto the internet or just into the world, it was harder to like respond back. So you got people that were responding back with passion, not necessarily people were like, I hate it and I want to make you feel bad about it.
Right.
So just that like barrier sort of made it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Exactly. Absolutely.
Also like 90s, like early internet, and you have like this pop culture boom. You also have like the first times where you can interact and make your niches with people around these things. And then you can do that along with the internet. And I feel like early internet, along with like getting into like your niche of what you love, was probably a lot more pure and wholesome than how it is now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's maybe social media even more than the internet. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I feel like when we say the internet, we mean social media too now, you know? And like chat rooms could be terrible. And like, what are they called?
Forums.
Like forums could be terrible.
Did you guys
still that like...
Yeah. Sorry, Yahoo groups? Did you
Yahoo groups? Right, exactly. All right. Like, all that stuff could be terrible, but there was still like a level of being removed. It wasn't like you're creating, you didn't have to interact through the entire internet with your personal identity. You know what I mean? And I feel like now everything knows everything. Like you're attached to, like Google knows what we're doing, and T-Mobile knows what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like, not to sound like a conspiracy nut, but it's just there's way more threads now than there used to be.
Also, just to continue what you were saying, the presentation of either yourself or your art at that time, there was never the expectation that it would be as polished, as sophisticated, as, you know, audience marketing navigable as professional stuff.
Well, when we were talking to our friend Antea, her company is the Ceramic. She does a lot of the ceramic pieces in the shop, like the weird little doll head mugs, and her stuff's amazing. but we were just talking about that the other day because she makes these incredibly beautiful, weird, creepy, spooky, awesome, kitschy pieces that take her a lot of time. And it is absolutely a skill set that most people don't have. Like it's a skill set that has to be cultivated. And she's so good at what she does. And we were talking about how, but now also in order to get the product to people, get the art to people, she has to be a photographer and a social media expert and a marketing expert. And you know what I mean?
Or independently wealthy so you can pay better people to do all those things.
There's that. There's that part. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little crazy.
Daunting.
It
All
is.
right. So this might be a strange little segue, but it was something I felt like I had to ask, seeing the plethora of stuff that's available in this theme at your shop. So do you have any thoughts on like the popularity of Gritty entering Philadelphia art, and he's become like a punk patron saint of Philadelphia?
We don't know what you're talking about. We don't sell any Gritty products.
Oh, that's right. Oh gosh, that's my fault. Not
I think
Gritty.
you're thinking of a different character.
A non-corporate
that we
owned
happen
character.
Yeah, we happen to have a lot of artwork parodying.
Yeah, exactly. Parodies. But it's not just your store.
No.
Of course,
corporate parody. I go down to the Wooden Shoe and I see all kinds.
Gritty is everywhere.
Yes, exactly.
Can I curse on this? Is that all right?
Please do.
Okay.
All right.
I love the origin story of Gritty because to me, there's nothing more Philadelphia than Gritty. And it's not because he's the Flyers mascot.
Yeah.
Like, I love that they announced this weird thing. And we were all like, this is weird. I don't know about this. And then the rest of the country was like, this is weird. And Philadelphia was like, fuck you.
Yeah.
He's ours. You can't talk about him. He's our king now. And
It's really...
like that's the most Philadelphia thing where you can be. It's like, you can't talk about my mother. Only I can talk about my mother.
Yeah.
And like, I feel that in my bones. Like, I love that so much. And then for Gritty to kind of take on this like queer, anti-fascist, like anti-white supremacist, like protest, like he's like the spokesperson. He's the monster. Yeah, I find like amazing. I'm like, Philadelphia is amazing.
Yeah,
I love this city.
We don't tell anyone in South Philly, but like we don't even like sports.
No.
Like, we don't give a shit about hockey, unless it's the Mighty Ducks. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, but Gritty,
I was gonna say Mighty Ducks. I love Mighty Ducks.
Yeah. Gritty, however, like he's
love it.
Yeah, and he's not. I don't think he's gonna slow down anytime soon either.
No.
Gosh, yeah, no. I think when he all sort of burst on the scene, we're like, okay, this is gonna be weird for a couple months, and it's gonna calm down.
Yeah,
but no, it just keeps going.
Yeah, I don't think I was in Philly when Gritty was first announced to be the mascot.
Yeah.
I used to watch like an internet series where they would cover like these weird topics that were going on in the world, and then they covered Gritty, and I was like, whoa! And I finally got to Philly and seeing Gritty everywhere. It's just like, wow. I would say that my favorite Gritty that I've seen was Gritty spanking Trump.
Oh my goodness. So we had those stickers in our shop. An artist named Kristen, she made stickers, and she was a customer. She came in and was like, hey, and normally like a cold call is kind of uncomfortable as far as like someone coming in and be like, hey, I make art, you want to see it? Like right here, right in the middle of like a shopping day. Like that can be very uncomfortable and awkward. This was not, however. She was totally cool about it. She's like, hey, I'm buying this stuff, but I also make these stickers and I have them here. You guys want to sell them? And we were just like, yeah, absolutely. And then she ended up wheat pasting it up, and it got like a ton of exposure. And it was fun. It's such a good piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really enjoy when people are in the shop with a friend who is not from Philly. And it's always the thing. Can you explain this orange thing to me, please?
Yeah.
What is it? And then I just listen to try and hear what the friend is going to say.
Yeah.
It's always different.
Yeah.
It's always different.
It doesn't quite make sense to walk into a store like ours, which is not a Philadelphia sports memorabilia store, and to say to someone who's not from Philly, oh, he's the Flyers mascot.
Mhm.
okay, that still doesn't actually explain why this store has all of these things.
It actually, I guess it sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the things that we can take from corporations and literally remake.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Redraw, reimagine, and remake. So for some
And
reason, he fits that.
And if I can for a second, we kind of going back to what we were talking about with pop culture, like, and I try to be as unbiased about this as I can because we're us and we do what we do, but I truly, and I know Nicole does too, truly, like, 1,000% believe that fan art only helps perpetuate whatever it is that they're making art of.
Yeah.
You know, like, I understand corporations and, like, entities that, you know, will send a cease and desist for, you know, a likeness of a product, but when it's done by fans, it only helps to keep the conversation for that thing going, you know? Like,
Yeah.
when we were making Empire Records stuff 10 years ago and there really wasn't any other merchandise for it, every time we had it at events, people would start talking about Empire Records. And so many times they'd be like, oh my God, I got to go buy this on DVD, or oh my God, I got to go see if this is streaming on Netflix, because they hadn't thought about it in so long. You know, so I feel like it's the same thing with Gritty. It's the same thing with movies and TV and music and what have you. Like, fan art only helps to promote that thing that people love and kind of keep its legacy alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I really resonate with that because, again, I grew up at around the same time, and I remember, I'm going to sound like such an old, like, you know, up hills both way in snow, but still, whatever. Like,
no shoes.
Right? I mean, I got into anime when I was in middle school and high school, and it was fan subs. It was VHS tapes that you sent people in the mail. They would copy their copy of something that had been, like, digitally altered by a fan who had that equipment and had that translation, and then they'd send it back to you for free.
That is so cool.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's so weird for me to think that it went from that to, like, what it is now, where you basically log onto the internet and you can stream whatever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was the idea behind it, was that they wanted more people to see these shows, to know this culture, and they were like, we want to spread it as far as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it only helps bring, like, not to sound too kumbaya about it, but so I work this in everything, and I'm going to do it right now. Don't tell mom. Don't tell mom The Babysitter's Dead is my favorite movie of all time. If you'd like to talk about that for an hour, we can. But not a lot of people were talking about it when we started doing craft fairs 13, whatever years ago. So whenever someone would come up to our table and be like, is that what is that movie? You know, and it, like, jogs their memory. And then having that conversation with them is so exciting because it's like, clearly I live with a person that I talk about this with every day. You know what I mean? But
Nicole Wave, like, this is my life.
This is my life. But clearly a lot of people don't, you know what I mean? Like, maybe their friends don't sit around talking about a movie from 1991 all the time, every day, like me, you know? But for that, like, 5-minute interaction, it kind of, like, gets people excited about something they haven't thought about for a while that they really enjoyed from their childhood. So it's cool.
Yeah. That's it for this episode. We want to give another shout out and a thank you to Nicole and Nicole of South Street Art Mart, our shoppers, our customers, and our wonderful board at Philadelphia AIDS Thrift. Thank you so much for listening to Queer Atlas, and we hope you join us next time here at Philly AIDS Thrift at Giovanni's Room, and we look forward to exploring even more physical and creative queer spaces in the world.
And stay tuned for the next episode, where we'll be having the second part of our interview with the South Street Art Mart. Hope to see you there.